It was a typical Tuesday morning at First Horizon Bank, the kind where the air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood. The lobby buzzed with the usual hum of activity, people chatting on phones, fingers tapping on keyboards, and the occasional clink of coins as customers made deposits or withdrawals. Among the crowd stood a woman in her late 40s, wearing a simple blouse and jeans. She didn't look like someone who belonged to the glitzy world of high finance, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. The woman walked up to one of the teller counters, clutching her purse tightly. Her name wasn't important yet, but her intentions were clear. She wanted to withdraw $50,000 from her account. It wasn't an outrageous amount for someone with deep pockets, but it was enough to raise eyebrows. The young man behind the counter, barely out of his early 20s, greeted her with a polite smile. "How can I assist you today?" he asked, his voice steady but tinged with nervous energy. "I'd like to withdraw $50,000, she said calmly, sliding her checkbook across the counter. The young teller, whose name tag read Ethan, nodded and began processing the request. But as he typed the numbers into the system, his brow furrowed. Something wasn't right. He glanced up at her, then back at his screen. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we can't process this withdrawal right now." The woman frowned, clearly confused. "Why not? It's my money." Ethan hesitated, unsure how to explain without sounding rude. "Our branch has a daily cash limit for withdrawals, and this exceeds that amount. You'll need special approval from our regional manager to proceed." He tried to sound professional, but there was a hint of discomfort in his tone. This wasn't the first time he'd dealt with difficult customers, but something about this woman felt different. There was a quiet authority in the way she carried herself, even though she wasn't dressed like the usual wealthy clients who came in demanding large sums. The woman sighed, her patience wearing thin. "Look, I understand. There are rules, but this is my account. I've been banking here for years. Can't you make an exception?" Ethan shook his head apologetically. "I'm really sorry, ma'am. It's not up to me. I don't have the authority to override the policy." The woman stared at him for a moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. She could sense that Ethan was just following orders, but that didn't make the situation any less frustrating. Finally, she grabbed her purse and stood up. "Fine," she said curtly, "but this isn't over." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan feeling uneasy. He watched her go, wondering if he'd handled the situation correctly. What Ethan didn't know, and what no one else in the branch realized, was that this seemingly ordinary woman wasn't just another customer. She wasn't some distant VIP client either. In fact, she was far more connected to the bank than anyone could have guessed. And while Ethan went back to helping the next person in line, the woman stepped outside, pulling out her phone to dial a number. As she waited for the call to connect, a small, determined smile crossed her face. "You'll see," she muttered, under her breath. "They'll all see soon enough." Little did Ethan or anyone else at the bank know, this wasn't just a random Tuesday. It was the start of something much bigger, something that would change everything they thought they knew about each other. Later that afternoon, the woman who had been refused at the bank earlier found herself walking into a completely different environment. This time, she wasn't in a bustling branch filled with customers and tellers. She was stepping into the sleek, modern headquarters of First Horizon Bank. The building was all glass and steel, with an air of quiet authority that matched her demeanor. She carried a leather folder under one arm, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floors as she made her way to the executive boardroom. This wasn't just any meeting. It was her first day back in the office after months of traveling abroad for high-stakes negotiations and mergers. Unbeknownst to most employees, this unassuming woman was now the CEO of First Horizon Bank. Her appointment had been announced quietly through internal memos, but not everyone in the company had processed the news yet. For many, she was still a faceless figure at the top, a name on paper rather than a person. As she entered the boardroom, the atmosphere shifted immediately. The room fell silent as heads turned to look at her. Dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, she exuded confidence and control. She didn't need to say much. Her presence alone commanded respect. Around the table sat senior executives, department heads, and a few junior staff members invited to observe. Among them was Ethan, the same young man who had denied her withdrawal request earlier that day. Ethan froze when he saw her walk in. At first he thought it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. But as she took her seat at the head of the table, there was no mistaking it. It was the same woman from the branch, the one he'd turned away just hours ago. His stomach dropped. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead as panic set in. How could this be happening? What were the odds? The meeting began, and Ethan tried to focus, but his mind kept racing. He couldn't shake the memory of their earlier encounter. Every word she spoke seemed to echo in his ears, each sentence laced with hidden meaning, or so it felt to him. When it came time for presentations, Ethan's turn arrived sooner than he would have liked. His task was to give a brief update on quarterly performance metrics for the branch where he worked. Normally, this would have been straightforward, but today every word felt like a test. He stood up, clutching his notes tightly, his hands trembling slightly. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice cracking ever so slightly. He cleared his throat and continued, stumbling over his words, as he flipped through slides that suddenly seemed impossibly complicated. All eyes were on him, but he only saw hers. The steady gaze of the woman he now realized held immense power over his career. When he finally finished, relief washed over him, but only briefly. As he sat down, he noticed her jotting something on a notepad. Was she writing feedback, criticism, a note to fire him later? His imagination spiraled out of control. But then unexpectedly she looked up and gave him a small nod. It wasn't glowing praise, but it wasn't dismissal either. It was acknowledgement, and maybe even understanding. After the meeting wrapped up, Ethan lingered behind, unsure whether to approach her or slip out unnoticed. Before he could decide, she caught his eye. "You're the intern from the branch, aren't you?" she asked casually, as if they hadn't already crossed paths earlier that day. Ethan nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled faintly, her expression unreadable. "I thought I recognized you. You did well today considering the circumstances." Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing there, equal, parts bewildered and grateful. As he left the building, Ethan replayed the moment in his head. He wasn't sure what to make of it. Was she testing him? Did she plan to hold this against him? Or was she simply giving him a chance to prove himself? Whatever the case, one thing was certain. His life and his career had just taken a turn he never saw coming. Back at the local branch, things were buzzing with gossip. Word about the woman who had tried to withdraw $50,000 spread like wildfire among the employees. People whispered behind counters and during lunch breaks, speculating about who she was and why she needed such a large sum of money. Some thought she might be involved in something shady, maybe laundering cash or funding some secret project. Others joked that she could be a mystery shopper sent by corporate to test their procedures. No one knew for sure, but everyone had an opinion. Ethan, still shaken from his encounter with her earlier that day, couldn't shake the feeling that he'd messed up somehow. He replayed the moment over and over in his head, wondering if there was anything he could have done differently. Should he have bent the rules? Called a manager sooner? Or maybe just handled it with more tact? His co-workers noticed his unease and pressed him for details. "What did she look like?" they asked. "Was she angry? Did she say anything?" Reluctantly, Ethan described her, the calm demeanor, the quiet confidence, the way she carried herself as though she owned the place. At first, his colleagues laughed it off. "Sounds like someone who watches too many movies about rich people," one of them joked. But Ethan wasn't laughing. Something about her stuck with him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what. Then came the email. A company-wide announcement landed in everyone's inbox late that afternoon. The new CEO of First Horizon Bank would officially take charge next week. Attached to the message was a photo of the incoming leader, a polished professional headshot of a woman in her late 40s wearing a navy blue suit. The resemblance to the woman from earlier that day was uncanny. Ethan stared at the screen, his heart pounding. It was her. The same woman who had stood in front of him just hours ago demanding her money. The same woman who had walked into the boardroom and taken control like it was second nature. And now she was the boss, not just of the branch, but of the entire bank. The realization hit him like a truck. He felt sick to his stomach. How could he have been so clueless? What had he done? Refusing a withdrawal was part of his job, sure, but refusing the CEO, that was a whole other level of trouble. Panic set in as he imagined all the possible consequences. Would she fire him on the spot? Demote him? Make his life miserable until he quit? His coworkers quickly picked up on his distress. When they saw the email and connected the dots, the teasing began. "Looks like you ticked off the wrong person," one of them said with a smirk. Another chimed in, "Better start updating your resume." Ethan forced a laugh, but inside he was anything but amused. The jokes stung because deep down he knew they weren't entirely wrong. But as the initial shock wore off, Ethan started to think more carefully about what had happened. Sure, he'd refused her request, but he'd followed protocol. He hadn't been rude or dismissive, he'd simply done his job. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't hold it against him. After all, she was the CEO. She had bigger things to worry about than one awkward interaction at a branch office. Still, the uncertainty gnawed at him. Over the next few days, he found himself replaying every detail of their encounter, searching for clues about how she might react. Would she call him out publicly? Pull him aside for a private conversation, or worse, ignore him completely? Each scenario played out in his mind like a movie, each ending more nerve-wracking than the last. Meanwhile, rumors continued to swirl around the branch. Some employees speculated that the new CEO would crack down hard on anyone who didn't follow the rules perfectly. Others wondered if she'd overhaul the entire system, replacing old-school policies with cutting-edge technology. Everyone had theories, but no one really knew what to expect. For Ethan, the wait felt endless. Every time the phone rang or someone approached his desk, he braced himself, thinking it might be her, or someone delivering news about her decision regarding his fate. He spent hours rehearsing apologies in his head, trying to figure out the right words to explain his side of the story. Despite the anxiety, a small part of him couldn't help but feel curious. Who was this woman really? How had she risen to become the CEO of such a massive organization? And what kind of leader would she be? These questions lingered in the back of his mind, overshadowed by fear, but impossible to ignore. As the days passed, Ethan realized something important. This situation wasn't just about him, it was about how he responded to it. If he let fear paralyze him, he'd miss an opportunity to learn and grow. But if he faced it head-on, if he owned up to his actions and showed he was willing to improve, he might just come out stronger. On the other side, little did he know the real test was yet to come. A few days later, Ethan found himself standing in the elevator of the corporate headquarters, nervously adjusting his tie. He had been summoned to deliver some documents to the executive floor, a task that would normally feel routine but now felt like walking into a lion's den. The air inside the elevator was cool, but Ethan's palms were sweaty. His mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if she recognized him? What if she decided to confront him right then and there? The doors slid open, and he stepped out cautiously, clutching the folder tightly against his chest. As he turned the corner toward the CEO's office, he nearly collided with someone stepping out of a nearby conference room. It was her, the woman who had haunted his thoughts since their encounter at the branch. For a moment, they both froze. Her eyes locked onto his, and Ethan felt his stomach drop. "Oh, good morning?" he stammered, trying to sound casual, but failing miserably. His voice cracked slightly, betraying his nerves. She raised an eyebrow, studying him for a second before a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "You seem familiar," she said slowly, tilting her head as though piecing together a puzzle. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the carpet or vanish behind one of the potted plants lining the hallway. Instead, he forced a weak smile and mumbled, "Yeah, I think we met briefly. At the branch." Her lips curved into a knowing smirk. "Ah, yes," she said. her tone light but laced with amusement. The teller who wouldn't give me my own money. Ethan's cheeks burned red. He fumbled for words, his brain scrambling to find something, anything that might salvage the situation. I'm so sorry about that, ma'am. I was just following procedure. I didn't mean any disrespect. She held up a hand, cutting him off mid-apology. To his surprise, she chuckled softly. Relax, she said, her voice calm and measured. It's fine. You were doing your job. Honestly, I appreciate it when people stick to the rules instead of bending them whenever it's convenient. Ethan blinked, caught off guard by her response. Was she serious? She wasn't mad? He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. His mind was still reeling from the unexpected turn of events. I'll admit, she continued, leaning back slightly as if settling into the conversation. It wasn't exactly the warmest welcome back to the company. But hey, life's full of surprises, isn't it? Her playful tone threw him completely off balance. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. No anger, no threats, no frosty silence, just a hint of humor and understanding. It was almost disarming. Yeah, Ethan managed to reply, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. Surprises definitely keep things interesting. She nodded, her expression softening. They do, and sometimes those surprises teach us important lessons, like how even the smallest interactions can have bigger meanings than we realize. Ethan swallowed hard, unsure whether she was referring to their earlier meeting or something else entirely. Either way, her words carried weight. For a brief moment he wondered if this whole thing, his refusal, her promotion, their chance encounter, was part of some cosmic plan designed to humble him. Or maybe it was just life reminding him that nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Well, she said finally, breaking the slightly tense but oddly comfortable silence. I assume you're here to drop off those documents? She gestured toward the folder clutched in his hands. Oh, right, Ethan said quickly, holding it out like it might explode if he held onto it too long. Yes, these are for you. Or, your assistant, I guess. She took the folder with a polite nod. Thank you, you've been very thorough, I appreciate it. Ethan nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and unease. He wasn't sure what to make of her demeanor. Was she being genuinely kind, or was this some sort of test? Before he could overthink it further, she added, By the way, I've heard good things about your work recently. Keep it up. With that, she gave him a small smile and walked away, leaving Ethan standing there stunned. As the elevator doors closed behind him moments later, Ethan leaned against the wall, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That could have gone much worse. In fact, it hadn't gone badly at all. If anything, it had gone surprisingly well. Too well, perhaps. But as the elevator descended, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of their story. Something told him their paths would cross again, and next time he'd need to be ready. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's life took a turn he never saw coming. Instead of being punished or ignored, he found himself under the wing of the very person he had feared would ruin his career. The CEO didn't just let the awkward elevator encounter fade into the background. She actively sought him out. At first, Ethan wasn't sure what to make of it. Was she testing him, trying to find reasons to criticize him further? But as time went on, it became clear that her intentions were far from malicious. She started assigning him small tasks, things that seemed simple at first glance but carried a lot of weight. One day, she asked him to prepare a report on customer feedback trends across the branches. Another time, she invited him to sit in on a meeting with senior executives to observe how decisions were made at the highest level. Each assignment pushed him out of his comfort zone, forcing him to think critically and adapt quickly. For someone who had spent most of his career handling routine transactions behind a counter, these opportunities felt like stepping onto an entirely new playing field. At first, Ethan struggled. He wasn't used to the fast pace of corporate life or the pressure of working alongside people who seemed to know exactly what they were doing. There were moments when he doubted himself, wondering if he was cut out for this kind of responsibility. But every time he faltered, she was there. Not to scold him, but to guide him. She'd pull him aside after meetings, offering constructive feedback without making him feel small. "You're doing fine," she'd say with a reassuring smile. "Just trust yourself more." What surprised Ethan the most was how much he began to enjoy the work. It wasn't just about crunching numbers or drafting reports. It was about solving problems and making a real impact. He realized that banking wasn't just a transactional business, it was about people. Whether it was helping customers save for their dreams or ensuring employees felt valued, everything boiled down to human connection. This realization changed the way he approached his job, both in the branch and in the corporate office. As Ethan grew more confident, so did his relationship with the CEO. Over coffee breaks or casual conversations in the hallway, they started talking not just about work, but about life. She shared stories from her own journey, how she had started as a junior analyst decades ago, facing skepticism because of her gender and background, how she had fought tooth and nail to climb the ranks, often feeling like an outsider in a world dominated by men. Her honesty struck a chord with Ethan. He admired her resilience and determination, qualities that inspired him to push harder and aim higher. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some of Ethan's colleagues grew jealous of the attention he was receiving. Whispers echoed through the halls. "Why is he getting special treatment? Must be nice to have the boss's favor." Ethan heard the gossip, of course, and it stung. He wondered if he should distance himself from her to avoid stirring up more resentment. When he brought this up during one of their chats, she listened intently before responding. "Don't let other people's opinions dictate your path," she said firmly. "If you're doing good work, that's all that matters. People will always talk, that's human nature. But at the end of the day, you answer to yourself, not to them." Her words stuck with him. Slowly, he learned to tune out the noise and focus on what truly mattered, growing as a professional and contributing meaningfully to the bank. And as he proved himself through hard work and dedication, even some of his critics began to soften. They saw how much effort he put into his assignments and how seriously he took his responsibilities. Respect replaced resentment, bit by bit. Through it all, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on how much he had changed since that fateful day at the branch. Back then, he had been terrified of making mistakes, afraid of stepping out of line. Now he understood that growth came from taking risks, even if it meant stumbling along the way. Every challenge, every uncomfortable moment had taught him something valuable. And perhaps the biggest lesson of all was this: leadership wasn't about wielding power over others. It was about lifting people up, giving them the tools and confidence they needed to succeed. That's what the CEO had done for him, whether she realized it or not. She hadn't just saved his career, she had transformed it. Ethan knew he still had a long way to go, but for the first time in his life, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Just as Ethan was starting to find his rhythm and settle into his new role, a storm hit, one that would test everything he had learned so far. It began with a routine IT update at the bank's headquarters. The tech team assured everyone it was nothing major, just a patch to improve system security. But within hours, chaos erupted. A cyber attack breached the bank's network, exposing sensitive customer data. Account details, transaction histories, even personal identification numbers were compromised. The news spread like wildfire. Customers flooded call centers, demanding answers. News outlets picked up the story, painting First Horizon Bank as careless and untrustworthy. Investors panicked, pulling out funds left and right. The stock price plummeted overnight. Employees scrambled to contain the damage, but the sheer scale of the breach overwhelmed them. For the first time, Ethan saw cracks forming in the usually polished facade of the company. People whispered in hallways, their faces pale with worry. No one knew what to do. Amidst the frenzy, the CEO called an emergency meeting. Ethan sat nervously in the conference room alongside senior executives and key staff members. He wasn't sure why he'd been included, perhaps because of his growing involvement in corporate matters, but he couldn't deny the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. When the CEO walked in, her expression was calm but steely. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "This is bad," she said bluntly, addressing the room. "But it's not the end of the world. We've faced challenges before and we'll face this one together. What matters now is how we respond." She divided the team into groups, assigning specific tasks to each. To Ethan's surprise, she handed him a critical role, leading the communication strategy. "You've seen firsthand how our customers think and feel," she explained. "I need someone who can speak their language, not just corporate jargon. Can you handle it?" Ethan hesitated for a moment. The idea of stepping into such a high-stakes role terrified him. What if he messed up? What if his words made things worse? But then he remembered her advice from weeks earlier. Don't let fear dictate your choices. Taking a deep breath, he nodded. "I'll do my best." Over the next few days, Ethan worked tirelessly alongside the PR team. They drafted press releases, prepared statements for social media, and coordinated responses to customer inquiries. Every decision felt monumental, every word carefully weighed. The goal was simple yet daunting: restore trust. They needed to show customers that the bank took their concerns seriously and was taking concrete steps to protect their information. Ethan suggested reaching out directly to affected customers instead of relying solely on mass announcements. "People want to know they're more than just account numbers," he argued during one brainstorming session. "If we personalize our response, it'll go a long way." The idea was risky. It required significant resources, but the CEO agreed. "Let's try it," she said. "We have nothing to lose by being human." As the plan unfolded, Ethan found himself working late nights, answering emails, and reviewing drafts until his eyes blurred. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the enormity of the task seemed impossible to overcome. But every time he faltered, the CEO was there, offering encouragement without sugarcoating the reality of the situation. "It's okay to be scared," she told him once, catching him staring blankly at his laptop. "Fear means you care. Just keep moving forward." Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Customers responded positively to the personalized outreach, appreciating the transparency and effort. Media coverage shifted from harsh criticism to cautious optimism as the bank rolled out stronger security measures and promised accountability. Investors, though still wary, started returning. The crisis wasn't over, but the worst of it had passed. Through it all, Ethan realized something profound. Leadership wasn't about having all the answers or never making mistakes. It was about staying steady in the face of uncertainty, rallying others around a shared purpose, and finding solutions even when the path ahead was unclear. And while the experience left him exhausted, it also filled him with pride. He hadn't just survived the storm, he had helped guide the ship through it. When the dust finally settled, Ethan looked back on those chaotic weeks with a mix of relief and gratitude. He had started as a nervous intern afraid of making waves, but now he stood as someone who had proven his worth under pressure. More importantly, he had earned the respect of the woman who had once intimidated him, a leader who had taught him that true strength lies not in power but in resilience and humanity. Months after the cyber attack, First Horizon Bank had not only recovered but emerged stronger than ever. The crisis had forced the company to rethink its approach to security, customer service, and transparency. Employees who had once felt like tiny cogs in a massive machine now understood the importance of their roles. Customers, too, began to see the bank as more than just a place to deposit money. It was an institution that valued their trust above all else. The annual company gala was always a big event, but this year it carried extra weight. Held at a grand hotel with chandeliers casting warm light over elegantly dressed attendees, the evening buzzed with energy. Employees from every level of the organization mingled, sharing stories and celebrating milestones. For Ethan, it was both exciting and nerve-wracking. He still wasn't used to being in the spotlight, especially not in front of hundreds of people. When the CEO took the stage to deliver her keynote speech, the room fell silent. Dressed in a sleek black gown, she commanded attention without saying a word. Her presence alone reminded everyone why she was at the helm. She began by acknowledging the challenges the bank had faced. The cyber attack, the loss of customer confidence, the sleepless nights spent rebuilding trust. But instead of dwelling on the difficulties, she focused on the lessons learned and the strength they had shown as a team. "We didn't just survive," she said, her voice steady and inspiring. "We grew. We adapted. And most importantly, we proved that when we stand together, there's no challenge we can't overcome." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, earning enthusiastic applause. Then came the moment Ethan hadn't seen coming. As the clapping died down, the Yao CEO gestured toward him. "There's someone I want to recognize tonight," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on him. "Ethan, could you join me up here?" For a split second, Ethan froze. Him? On stage? In front of everyone? His heart raced as murmurs rippled through the room. Slowly, he stood up and made his way to the stage, his legs feeling like jelly. When he reached the podium, the CEO handed him a plaque engraved with bold letters, "Rising Star Award." "This award goes to someone who has shown incredible growth, resilience, and dedication," she continued, addressing the audience. "Ethan started as an intern, but during one of our toughest moments, he stepped up in ways none of us expected. His ideas, hard work, and commitment helped us rebuild trust with our customers. Tonight, we celebrate not just what he accomplished, but who he became in the process." The room erupted in applause, and Ethan felt tears welling up in his eyes. He hadn't realized how much his efforts meant, not just to the CEO but to the entire organization. Overwhelmed, he managed to choke out a few words of gratitude. I don't even know where to start," he admitted, his voice trembling. "When I first started working here, I never imagined I'd be standing here today. All I wanted was to do my job well. But thanks to the support of so many people, especially our CEO, I've learned so much about leadership, teamwork, and believing in myself. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." As he stepped off the stage, colleagues patted him on the back, congratulating him warmly. Some teased him good-naturedly, calling him the rising star, while others expressed genuine admiration for how far he'd come. Ethan couldn't stop smiling, but beneath the joy was a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just recognition for his work, it was validation of his potential. Later that night, as the gala wound down and guests began to leave, Ethan found himself sitting alone at a table, reflecting on everything that had happened. From the day he refused the mysterious woman's withdrawal request to the countless late nights navigating the fallout of the cyber attack, it had been a whirlwind journey. He thought about the CEO, the person who could have easily dismissed him after their awkward encounters but chose instead to invest in him. Her belief in him had changed his life in ways he couldn't have predicted. Just then, she approached, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Mind if I join you?" she asked with a smile. Ethan shook his head, gesturing for her to sit. She handed him one of the glasses and raised hers in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said simply. "To new beginnings," Ethan echoed, clinking, his glass against hers. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the remnants of the party unfold around them. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Thank you," he said softly. "Not just for tonight, but for everything. You didn't have to give me a chance, but you did, and I'll never forget that." She smiled, her expression thoughtful. "You earned it, Ethan. Don't ever forget that either. Life gives us opportunities, but it's up to us to seize them. You seized yours, and ran with it." Those words stayed with Ethan long after the gala ended. They weren't just a compliment. They were a reminder of how far he'd come and how much further he could go. For the first time, he truly believed in himself, not because someone else told him to, but because he knew he was capable of greatness. And as he walked out of the hotel into the cool night air, Ethan felt ready for whatever lay ahead. Ethan's transformation wasn't just about personal growth, it was about leaving a mark. A few weeks after the gala, he found himself sitting in his small office at corporate headquarters, staring at a blank notebook. The Rising Star Award sat proudly on his desk, catching the light every time he glanced at it. But Ethan wasn't thinking about accolades or titles. He was thinking about something bigger. He had spent months learning from the CEO, watching how she inspired people, solved problems, and turned crises into opportunities. What struck him most was her focus on helping others succeed. She didn't just lead by telling people what to do. She led by showing them what they were capable of. That's when an idea began to take shape in his mind. What if he could create a program that gave other young employees the same kind of support he'd received? The next day, Ethan approached the CEO with his proposal. "What if we start a mentorship initiative?" he suggested nervously, laying out his thoughts. "We could pair junior staff members with senior leaders, not just for training but for real guidance. It would help them see their potential and give them someone to turn to when things get tough." To his relief, she loved the idea. "That's exactly the kind of thinking I want to see," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Let's make it happen." Over the following months, Ethan poured his energy into developing the program. He worked closely with HR, senior executives, and even some of his former colleagues from the branch to design something impactful. They called it Pathways to Leadership, and its goal was simple: to empower employees at every level to grow, innovate, and thrive. The program launched with a pilot group of 20 participants, each paired with a mentor who believed in their potential. Watching the program unfold was one of the proudest moments of Ethan's life. He saw shy interns blossom into confident professionals, hesitant tellers step into leadership roles, and seasoned managers rediscover their passion for teaching. It wasn't always easy. There were setbacks and challenges, but every success story made the effort worth it. Meanwhile, the CEO continued to inspire those around her. Her door was always open, whether someone needed advice, encouragement, or just a listening ear. She often told Ethan that leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about creating space for others to shine. And as Ethan watched her interact with employees, from entry-level staff to top executives, he realized she practiced what she preached. Years passed, and both Ethan and the CEO left lasting legacies at First Horizon Bank. Ethan eventually became a vice president, overseeing initiatives that bridged the gap between branches and corporate offices. His journey served as proof that anyone, no matter where they started, could rise to greatness with hard work and the right support. As for the CEO, she retired after a decade of leading the bank through unprecedented growth and change. On her last day, she gathered the entire team for a farewell speech. Standing before them, she reflected on her career, not the awards or achievements, but the people she had met along the way. "Leadership isn't about titles or power," she said. "It's about lifting others up and giving them the tools they need to build something better. If I've done that, even for one person, then my job here is done." When she finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Ethan stood near the front, clapping harder than anyone. As she stepped down from the stage, she stopped in front of him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've come so far," she said warmly. "I'm proud of you." Ethan smiled, feeling a lump form in his throat. "And I'll never stop being grateful to you," he replied. Their paths diverged after that, but the lessons they shared stayed with them forever. For Ethan, the experience taught him that true success wasn't measured by promotions or recognition. It was about making a difference. And for the CEO, it reinforced the belief that investing in people was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind. Life moved on, but the bond they forged remained unbroken. Years later, when Ethan walked into a new branch and saw fresh-faced interns eager to learn, he couldn't help but smile. He knew exactly how they felt, and he was ready to guide them just as someone once guided him. In the end, it wasn't just about a bank or a job. It was about trust, resilience, and the incredible things that can happen when two people cross paths at just the right moment.